All right, we're back with more coverage here from reInvent 2023. I am A.M. Grabelny, one of your hosts and a developer advocate here with Sydney. Sydney just put up with my wonderful, I'll say wonderful, alien simulator.
It was a ton of fun. Learned a lot about Party Rock in the last session. And this session, we are going to talk about digital sovereignty and AWS Control Tower. Thanks for being here. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure, thanks for having us. So my name's Irina Masroor. I'm a senior product manager for AWS Control Tower.
And my name is Gaurav Gupta, and I'm a senior product manager for Control Tower focused on controls.
All right, so we mentioned digital sovereignty, and forgive me, please. I'm not that familiar with it, and there might be people in the audience like me too. So can we talk at first about what digital sovereignty is?
Absolutely. So at a very high level, digital sovereignty is the control of your digital assets, such as where your data resides, who has control over your data, and where the data flows, right? And last year in November, AWS launched the Digital Sovereignty Pledge, in which we are committed to providing all of our AWS customers the most advanced set of controls for the digital sovereignty requirements, right? Where customers can deploy those controls in order to sort of meet their digital sovereignty requirements that help with the 4 core pillars of digital sovereignty, which are encryption, resiliency, granular access restriction, right? And I'm forgetting the last one, but there are 4 pillars that we target for the digital sovereignty requirements with those controls.
Are you going to go to the tattoo and piercing booth later and get those 4 pillars tattooed on you somewhere?
Maybe. I'll mull over it, yes.
I'll do it if you do it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Sure.
Wow, all right. Jumping right into digital sovereignty, Sydney.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's amazing. Okay. All right, and so where does Control Tower fit into digital sovereignty?
Absolutely. So, let me give you a very brief introduction of what Control Tower is to begin with, right?
That's a great
Absolutely,
start.
right? So Control Tower provides a quick and an easy way for you to set up a secure and a governed multi-account environment, right? So Control Tower builds a landing zone based on best practice blueprints, and it also comes with pre-packaged controls that customers can deploy in order to start governing their workloads, protecting their workloads within Control Tower, right? So with and from a digital sovereignty perspective, just on Monday we released 65 Control Tower managed controls. And we also released a enhanced capability for region deny control that Control Tower already had, but this is a new control that we have released that can be deployed at an organizational unit level,
Right.
which helps meet the digital sovereignty requirements faster, right, and with confidence. So that is the direction that Control Tower is taking towards the digital sovereignty pledge, and that is what we have delivered this year as far as our efforts towards digital sovereignty is concerned.
Nice. And, you know, I think a lot of people, especially when they're just getting into AWS, don't consider that they're going to have more than one AWS account, you know. But if you work at a very large company, so for example, I was talking with Capital One earlier yesterday, and, you know, George Mao, the distinguished engineer over there, mentioned they have thousands of accounts, right? And you can't come in and manage thousands of accounts
Exactly.
individually, right? Like
Exactly.
you need
Right.
something like Control Tower to do this. But can you give, for the audience that are maybe new to multi-account setups, you know, some insights into why you need multiple accounts?
Absolutely. So the way it began, right, when we talked about multi-account environment back in the day it was a very targeted customer segment where we were customers with large workloads were only looking at multi-account environments. However, as we grew, as customers' requirements grew, now everyone starts with the thinking of we need to have a multi-account setup, right? And what Control Tower provides in that sense is that apart from being able to manage just the multiple accounts within the single organization, it also provides you the way to centralize your logging, for example, right?
Yes.
So with multi-account setup, there are a lot of requirements that come in, such as centralized logging, controls that you need to deploy or enable across those accounts depending on what workloads you're hosting within those accounts, right? So all of the best practices that we recommend to customers when they are operating in a multi-account environment is taken care of out of the box with Control Tower. So you deploy Control Tower, you get all of these awesome things out of the box, right? And then you can just start developing your workloads within AWS without having to think about, defining, implementing, and managing those controls at the end of the day, right? Which is a huge time-consuming task. It's a huge operational overhead.
Yes.
And Control Tower takes that pressure off of customer, and we do that for the customers.
That's great.
That's awesome.
I'm sure, Sydney, in your line of work, Control Tower probably plays in incident response,
when we're
right?
just talking about, it just depends on the account setup and the account architectures that customers are using.
Yeah, centralized logging, those sounds.
About
sounds
the
nice.
controls that you mentioned. So is there anything about like region deny capabilities or something along those lines that would tie into this conversation?
100%, absolutely. So before reInvent, right, before Monday, Control Tower had a region deny control, which was at the landing zone level. So what that control does is that it enables customers to define who has access to certain regions, right, within the Control Tower environment, right? However, before Monday, that control could only be deployed at the landing zone level, meaning the control, when enabled, applied to all the organizational units within the environment, which was beneficial. However, it was sort of rigid, where customers could not configure the control to provide targeted access for regions, IAM actions, or even principals who can or cannot access those regions, right? So on Monday, when we released the enhanced region deny capabilities, which was basically a new region deny control, which can now be applied at an organizational unit level. So it's much more granular than the landing zone level. And on top of that, now customers can configure the control where they can select which regions they want to allow access to their developers, right? And the next part of the setting is they can also allow list IAM actions that they want the developers to perform in regions that are outside of that control, right? And then the last and the most important, in my opinion, the most important configuration that a lot of our customers have asked us in the past years is to have IAM exceptions, right? How can I allow a specific user or a specific role to go into a region where no one is allowed for whatever use case they have, right? So now we also support IAM exceptions that customers can configure within that control. And when the control is deployed, at the end of it, customers have a certain set of regions where the developers can operate into. And based on what you have defined within the IAM actions and IAM principal exemptions, other roles or users might be able to access the regions that are denied by that control, right? So that's another thing that we have delivered towards our digital sovereignty pledge. We are really excited about the region deny control. It has been quite a lot of work. A lot of our customers ask for us because, as you can imagine, right, the control is so powerful where you're allowing or denying access to a certain region. And as customers increase their workloads, as customers increase their footprint in cloud, they tend to cross those regional boundaries where you need to have certain workloads in certain regions, and then you have to have these controls where you want to make sure that your data residency requirements are met. Right. So that's where the region deny control helps.
Got it. And so we've talked about it a lot now, but do you have anything, maybe a demo that today?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's jump in.
Dive into a demo.
Yeah, let's get Arena's screen pulled up. All right. There we go, Arena.
All right, we're in. Great.
We're in.
All right, so today I'm going to go over the new controls that were launched, as well as a new grouping that we created for those controls. So it's the 65 controls that we talked about so far. But in addition, we also grouped together all the potential digital sovereignty controls that our customers could be interested in a single group. And that group contains a little over 240 controls. I'm going to go over that. Additionally, I'm going to double click and kind of dive into that region deny control in a little more detail as well. So starting with the new controls, we're going to start with the AWS Control Tower landing zone. So in here, I have a little bit of high-level information about my environment. I have a few OUs, some accounts, controls already set up. And today, we're going to focus on the control library piece of it. We're going to take a look at the categories. So there are some existing categories that we had prior to this launch. But what we did was, in addition to mapping the new controls only to the digital sovereignty grouping, we also mapped it to the existing types of categories that we have already. So things that relate to those 4 pillars that Gaurav talked about, those are also defined here as well. And we're going to talk more about that once we get into the group. But here you can see control objectives, things like encrypting your data, establishing better logging and monitoring, and so on. Additionally, you can see these controls by service as well. So if you're trying to lock down a specific service, you're able to see all the controls that relate to that service here.
Awesome.
Yeah. If you have a regulatory framework that you're interested in, we have 3 categories for that as well. We have NIST, PCI, and CIS. So you can see here. Additionally, it's worth mentioning that for each of these categories, we also define like the control objectives that map to them as well, and the number of controls within each one of those. Now, the creme de la creme, the new exciting thing, is groups. So this is the new one. This is digital sovereignty. We decided to create a group because it's not exactly a framework. One important thing to consider when talking about digital sovereignty is that it's not a cookie cutter approach. It varies a lot depending on where you are geographically, what company you're part of, what industry you're part of. So therefore, we created a new type of category, a group. So here, customers can go and look for all the controls that could potentially meet their digital sovereignty requirements. And we're going to double click into this and take a look at what's inside. Okay. So as I had said, there's about 243 shy of 240 controls here. It maps to 10 objectives. And then I want to double click into the description because I want to talk a little bit about what is inside the digital sovereignty grouping as well. So here we have 3 types of controls, the types of controls that AWS Control Tower supports today. So those are preventative controls. I'm talking about the first piece here, so we prevent this piece, the requirements. Oh, yep. So without reading that, I'm just going to talk over it. So we have 3 types of controls that we enable. We have preventative controls. They're essentially SCPs under the hood, so they prevent you from taking any sort of action. We have detective controls that notify you when something is out of compliance in a state that you don't want it in. These are defined as AWS config, security hub, so detective controls under the hood there. And then additionally, we have proactive controls, which under the hood are CloudFormation hooks. So those allow developers to see if they're in compliance before they even deploy a CloudFormation template. So instead of creating the template, trying to deploy in production, and then seeing that it's not allowed, instead they're able to see as they're developing their CloudFormation templates that it is not allowed. I'm just going to talk about those pillars one more time as well. So the purpose of these is to meet the 4 pillars of digital sovereignty. Those are data residency, where the data resides, granular access control, who has access to that data, encryption at all states, and then resilience. So
we got all 4 of that, chat.
Resilience.
I missed the first one.
The chat said they were on the edge of their seats for the 4th one. I almost said they needed to subscribe to our Patreon to get that 4th one.
There
but
you
we
go.
got it.
We
don't have a Patreon. Only joking.
Resilience. So that's the idea of like, if something goes wrong, how quickly can you recover from it? So that's what these controls are all about. The next thing I want to talk about is the region deny control. So go into that in a little bit more detail. So from this page, I'm just going to go to all controls. So here is a list of all controls that Control Tower has today. And here I'm going to do a quick search for one that applies to multiple services. So here I've got the one. This is the region deny control. When I double click into it, I get a little bit of information about the control. So here, going through this metadata quickly, I just want to give you a little idea of what you can get here. So we've got the control ID, some information about it, what type of control it is, what kind of behavior. So this is a preventative driven by an SCP, as we had said before. What frameworks it maps to. So you'll also find these in these regulatory framework categories as well. The grouping, this is the new piece, digital sovereignty. And then if you're trying to enroll it via API, this is an important point. So this is applicable not just through the console, but you can also do this through CLI and API. And this is the API identifier that you can use there.
Great. I was actually going to ask that because I saw 200, 600 control. That's a lot of controls to go through manually. So if you could set up automation through the API.
Sure.
SDKs,
Absolutely.
CLIs. That was going to be a question, but you already answered.
There you
it for
go.
me, Aria. Thank
So
you.
totally applicable.
And on the point of API, sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, right? With the release of this new region deny control, we also released an API called Update Control API, which will now help you configure the control as well, right? Which we did not have earlier. Just wanted to mention that.
That's awesome.
Alright.
Great. Okay.
Awesome. So what else here?
Next thing I want to talk about is control groupings. So when you have a control, you want to know what controls you should consider using with a certain control. So here, in addition to the region deny that we have here, which is at the organizational unit, which Gaurav described earlier, we have a link to the landing zone one as well. So here is the region deny at the landing zone, and these kind of work together. So if you think about an organization, you could have different types of access required for different regions. There could be regions that you want to just deny across the board for your entire organization. So those you would deny at the landing zone. But sometimes you want a little bit more granular control for other regions, like some parts of the organization need access to it, other parts do not. That's what you would configure here at the OU level instead. All right.
Got it. And well, there's a question from chat. Do you mind if I ask it real quick? So it said, new to AWS, how does this work with IAM for access and control, or is there any overlap at all?
Yeah, good.
There isn't necessarily, right? For example, IAM policies, right? You are attaching those policies to a certain IAM role or an IAM user, which is strictly for access to services or IAM actions, whatnot, right? However, the controls are more broader in Control Tower, where they apply to your workloads. Is there an overlap? There could be, right? Because there are policies that you can apply to a user who is working within your Control Tower environment, who may or may not be allowed to access a certain part of your workload, correct? But when thinking of IAM policies or the controls that Control Tower has should be completely different, right? In the sense that Control Tower controls are more broader. They are there to protect your workload, so to speak, where IAM policies or IAM actions that you can define within the IAM service itself applies to a specific role or a specific user, right?
Got it. Okay. I think that answers the question. What do you think, AM?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Next, for the most exciting part, we're going to enable this control on another OU. So we're going to see where it's enabled right now. Currently, I have it enabled in one OU, so that's the sandbox environment. So that's the sandbox OU and all the accounts under it. I'm going to enable it for one more OU. So let's go to enable. I'm going to choose the other OU that I have available here, and that is test. Going next. Now here, I choose what regions I'm allowing access to. So in this case, I'm going to say I only want access to my US governed regions. So this data cannot leave the US. Therefore, these accounts within the OU can only operate within the US. I'm going to select that and click next. Here I've got the region deny policy. You can see in detail what is being restricted based on that policy. The most exciting part of this page is here at the bottom, these not actions. This is what Gaurav described before, and I just want to emphasize that there are exceptions to this control now. So instead of just being a blanket deny, I can choose specific actions that I'm instead going to allow. So in addition to everything in this policy, I'm going to allow some storage access for my users as well. So in this case, let's see, I'm going to allow to create DB clusters.
And while you're doing this, I mean, I could see obviously how this is very applicable to digital sovereignty, but I could also see how this is just in general applicable to best practices for security.
100%.
Because
Absolutely,
if you are
yeah.
not operating in a region, you shouldn't just leave that region open. Because
Exactly.
That's just another monitoring vector that you have to have.
Yep.
And if you're not ever deploying workloads in that region, why not come in and turn this on?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%.
Oh.
Okay, so we've allowed a couple actions. Okay, go next. Now here I can also give exceptions to IAM principles. So I happen to have one here. So in this case, we're just going to stick with the storage theme, and we'll go with the DB admin, add them in. And another exciting thing that we just launched a couple weeks ago is the ability to add tags to our controls as well. So might as well showcase that as well.
Awesome.
So we're
let's
going
do
to
it.
create an environment tag and just call it test. And we're going to click next. And on this page, you can just double check everything that you did previously. So we're applying it to the test OU, the single region in the US, a couple of not actions that we're going to allow. So that's those storage actions, the principal, and our tag. Fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and roll this control. It just takes a couple seconds, and then we'll get to the next page where we'll be able to see that it is indeed applied to the test OU.
All right, and we've got about a minute left as we're seeing this come to fruition. Do you have any suggestions for people in chat where to get started, where to go check these things out? Should they just go in and click into Control Tower? What do you think?
100%, right? We have published. To begin with, we have published the documentation with all the What's New posts, right? We have the user guide where we showcase how customers can start benefiting from this control. Just from within the console itself, it's pretty easy to get to the control as Arina showed earlier. You click on the all controls on the left-hand pane and search for multi-service, where you can start deploying the control, right? And that's the beauty of Control Tower, in my opinion, where it's so easy to do stuff within AWS environment when you have Control Tower set up. Creating accounts, super easy, a click solution. Deploying controls, as you just saw that, it's so easy to filter the controls, get to the control, deploy the control, right?
Yeah.
And with all the APIs that we have released in the past and we have released recently, it's super easy to also have that automation set up and incorporate that into your DevOps pipeline and that whole work cycle so that you can just start managing workloads, deploying workloads in Control Tower.
All right, well, Irina's screen loaded. We see the control there, but unfortunately, we have to move on to our next segment. But I'm glad we got that information out to the customers so that they can get started with
Absolutely.
digital
Yes,
sovereignty.
thank you both
Thank
so
you.
much. I
Thanks for
learned a
having
ton.
us.
Likewise, yep.
All right, stick around. We'll be right back.